2, 1, start.
Excellent. So thank you everyone who's been able to join us. We really appreciate having you join us. We have a very special town hall today. We're very fortunate to have the Assistant Secretary General Cherith Norman with us, who will be giving some remarks. But first, let me start by wishing you all a very happy 2022. Bonne année à tous. I hope you managed to have a good break over the holidays and spend some time with family and loved ones. I know that we were hoping that 2022 would be an improvement in the COVID situation. So far, that's not the case. Of course, let's see what happens. There's some housekeeping information in the Q&A, so if you have a chance, take a look at that. This town hall is going to be in English, and we do not have interpretation. I will make an effort to speak a little slowly. If any of us are going too fast, please feel free to drop a note in the Q&A, and we'll try to take that on board. You also should be free to put your questions in the chat in the Q&A in English or French. And we will be answering questions either orally or as appropriate in writing. When we answer questions in writing, we'll try to indicate, we'll put the name of the person who's answering. We learned that from the last town hall, that the answers with the moderator were anonymous, and I know that was frustrating for some colleagues. Also, there is the option to include your question with your name. We would appreciate that if you can do that. This just helps us give a sense of the context of the question. And now, with no further ado, as they say, I'd like to turn it over to Cherith. Cherith, you have the floor.
Kira, thank you so much, and good afternoon to our Geneva colleagues. I am so delighted to be here, and I was very appreciative of the invitation to join you today, join Kira in the beginning of 2022, and I just want to extend my greetings as well. Happy New Year. Really look forward to engaging you as the year goes on. It's hard to believe when I think back, it's almost in April, it will have been a year since I joined at DGACM. And so I'm very grateful that I have this opportunity to talk to you, talk to the staff early on in this year and see how things go from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. I want to just start by thanking everyone. It's, as Kira noted, 2022, we were all hoping that we would start to see light at the end of this pandemic tunnel, so to speak, and things would, as we had seen over the summer, things starting to get back to normal somewhat, our operations slowly ramping up into a more normal, what we're used to in terms of more in person, etc. But I know that it's been difficult for everyone to have to step back again. And I just want to say that that we are very well aware of the impact that this has on everyone when we start forward, we step back because of the pandemic and everything that brings. But I just want to say thank you, and in that context, very much for the dedication that each of you have brought and bring every day, but just your commitment to the work that you do each and every day. I think that we are more than ever, we need to ensure that we're taking care of ourselves. This is a longer haul, so to speak, in terms of having to deal with these whatever the pandemic brings our way. But in addition, it's just the work that continues unabated, and I very much appreciate. And I have to say, I have been, I've observed this from day one, but since joining the department. But obviously, I saw this for my many years as a delegate, seeing the commitment and the dedication and the professionalism that DGACM staff writ large has, and I'm so appreciative. I would say for Geneva, not only are you grappling with all the challenges that the pandemic has brought, you're in the midst of a major renovation, and that specifically impacts DGACM's work and DCM's work, and the availability of rooms and having to maneuver around those constraints too. So I just want to say thank you. I very much note, and I've seen this from day one, that the Division of Conference Management has succeeded in ensuring the business continuity through the continued provision of services, the remote provision of services, including through virtual and hybrid meetings with and without interpretation, the provision of accessibility services to meetings in virtual and hybrid format, the paperless circulation of statements, and the technical moderation that you continue to do for events. You know, when I say the work is continued unabated, I see that that there's already in 2021 there was it was definitely much more than 2020. Not as much as we obviously experienced in a year, but with the conditions we had, the over 5,000 meetings was an incredible achievement, and the way that we were able to service them in the different formats at UNOG. And I just want to say very much commend the work there. I also note that the total number of words that were translated were well over 70 million. And that the 99% of the documents were issued or processed in a timely manner. And again, I think that just goes to, that speaks volumes to the commitment and to the dedication of you and the staff there. I also appreciate the fact that not only are we servicing the meetings and the events that are happening in Geneva, but you're servicing conferences away from headquarters or away from Geneva. And a significant one was the COP26 in Glasgow that Geneva staff serviced. And I've heard from the organizers from the British government how much they appreciated and how much they were impressed by the professionalism and the ingenuity, the creativity that was required for unexpected situations. And so high praise was received. And I just want, I'm glad I have this opportunity to pass that along directly. I also want to say that that enhancing coordinations amongst the duty station, which I'm glad to come speak to you as the Assistant Secretary General, but in being here in New York, I'm also glad to be able to share some context and basically what's happening here in New York. But increasing this coordination between the duty stations is one of my priorities, and I've been very grateful for the monthly coordination meetings that I host with Geneva, Nairobi, and Vienna, and that has, I think, been a very useful way to ensure that we are even better coordinated. And I know that this happens, you know, from my monthly meetings on down to the different levels, from the chiefs to the directors. So I just wanted to emphasize that is a priority. That's something that we'll be focused on taking, just increasing that and seeing where we can even coordinate even more and better over the course of the year. In terms of the situation here in New York and at headquarters, I know many of you are aware of some of the shifts that we've had to make, but just to specifically provide some of the updates related to COVID-19, as you all may have seen or heard, staff are currently, and we took this decision at the end of December, but staff are currently allowed to telecommute 5 days a week until the end of January, functions permitting. And that means, again, that our DGACM, our DCM colleagues are coming in through thick and thin. And I again, just commend everyone for their dedication. There was a letter sent by the Deputy Secretary General on January 7th to the President of the General Assembly that recommended that meetings other than those of the GA plenary and the Security Council be postponed and convened virtually. And as you can imagine, that was a significant decision or recommendation not taken lightly, because we had large conferences that were scheduled, such as the NPT review, that had to be postponed, and now we're looking at potential postponement, or likely postponement, I should say, of the ad hoc committee on cybercrime. But those are things that have happened over the course of January. The OSH committee here in New York is going to review this again as of January 24th and make a recommendation whether we continue this current posture. You know, the headlines and the reports coming out from New York City are saying that things are looking a little better, although the case numbers are still very high. So I'm hopeful that we can start to, as the weeks go forward, we'll be able to start to increase our posture again and not have these disruptions to our normal calendar of conferences and to the in-person meetings. I thought I'd say a few words on the budget for 2022 and just mention a couple highlights that are specifically relevant to DGACM and DCM there in Geneva. Thankfully, the Fifth Committee, a committee I'm very familiar with, got their act together, and I can say this because I can say this as being maybe I feel like I have a little bit of freedom to say, but they got their act together and passed the budget before Christmas on early mornings. I guess the plenary adoption was early morning on the 24th, but they achieved agreement on the 23rd of December, and they appropriated 345 million, almost 346 million for DGACM. We had a slight reduction just based on the vacancy rates that were approved, but I say all in all, I think we came out very well. And what's even better is that we, because of the financial situation improving somewhat, although we are not out of the woods yet, we have our full allotment. I think for colleagues who've been through this is the first time in a number of years. I did mention the vacancy rate, but just to highlight, the GA did decide that a vacancy rate of 10% was to be established for professional staff, and 9.2 for the general service staff, and that is going to be the basis of the budget for 2022. I did note that the vacancy rate in Geneva stands at 11.8 for professional staff and 11% for general service staff. And that was up against a vacancy rate before of 9.1 and 7.4 respectively. So I take this moment to say we are very focused on ensuring that we fill the vacancies that we have in a very timely manner. And I know this is something that Kira is very focused on, as well as the other chiefs. And we look forward to hearing the plans in terms of how to address those vacancies. The other thing that of note that was in the budget resolution was that the GA again commended the increased throughput productivity of translation services across all duty stations and the achievements made by language staff to meet the revised workload standards as set out in Resolution 75252. But requested the Secretary General to ensure adequate training and technical support in order to ensure equal treatment of all official languages, which we welcomed. This is something that we have been committed to since the revision, since we had the mandate given to us, or the revised workload standards given to us last year. We've been very committed to ensure that staff have what they need to meet those standards. And I want to say here, I was very pleased to see and note that there was a 10% increase through Geneva over the course of 2021, and I just commend the efforts that the translators are making in meeting the new productivity targets and increasing your productivity even over the course of last year. And that's while maintaining timely processing and issuance. I know this is an issue that I have engaged in quite a bit. And I will continue to do so to ensure that staff have what they need to meet those standards, and that we are going to be looking. I'm very appreciative of the work that Michelle is doing with Cecilia here and the harmonization group and all the task forces that are looking at those specific areas that we need to ensure that there is the appropriate support there. In terms of priorities for DGACM in 2022, you know, these are set out in the relevant budget documents and our senior management compacts between myself and the USG. And in a very broad way, we are focused on providing high quality documents in a timely manner, as well as high quality conference services to member states at all headquartered duty stations, as well as to achieve those aims as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible, in line with or in accordance with the relevant resolutions of the General Assembly. But we are guided by a strategy of continuous modernization and improvement, and committed to fostering a climate that generates innovative ideas. And in that regard, I think one of the focus of 2022 will be to continue to look at how we harness technology and our IT tools that really, I don't think I can say it enough. And I think the member states have recognized this over and over, and you will hear this, and you have heard this, I'm sure. But the fact that the proactive and foresight, the proactive investment and the foresight that DCM had in developing the tools that manages our workload, our requirements, enabled the organization to stay functioning through the pandemic and when we went into lockdown, and really provided that foundation, that baseline for business continuity of the organization. Without those tools, I cringe to see what trouble we would have been in trying to ensure that meetings were able to continue. The General Assembly was able to meet Security Council and the HRC, other bodies that are critical for the looking at the issues and everything that's confronting the world today. So that is going to be a big focus of ours, is how we even better harness and collaborate and ensure that we are using these tools, that we are ensuring consistency and how we're able to do that. I would note that I'm very happy to see the work that's being done in Geneva and leading the way on some of these tools with Indico, but also GData and being able to manage. I talked about workforce or workload sharing, and this is also something that I'm very cognizant that the tools that we have are really the facilitators for this and enable us to do this. The other priorities that I know that we are focused on as well is the accessibility efforts, and I'm very appreciative of the leadership role that DCM and Geneva takes in these issues. I've been so pleased as we are preparing this latest report to the General Assembly, what we are able to share of the efforts that Geneva has undertaken to ensure accessibility and that persons with disabilities have full access to UN meetings. And sustainability, just making sure our operations are sustainable, is also another priority. I also would mention that one initiative that I am leading on is enhancing the integrated global management of conference services, and that's, I mentioned workload sharing, that's an element of it, but I am engaging the duty stations as well as the Division of Administrations in those duty stations to ensure that we are even more harmonized and synced up. I just want to conclude now by ending with how I started, and just commending you all for your hard work, commitment, dedication, and I really look forward to meeting you in person. That's what I really hope can happen in 2022, that we can travel and that I can come see the operations in person. I have to say, little did I know that I would be sitting in this seat, even as of last year. But over the course of the years that I was a delegate, I came to Geneva. That was the one trip I took. I came to Geneva and had the opportunity every time I was there to come by. I would see Kira and others, and I would see DCM's operations. But now I'm really hopeful that I can come and meet even more of you in person and see even more of the operations there. With Kira, thank you so much for the invitation. I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Cherith, and we are certainly looking forward to having you here in Geneva. We all hope that things will clear up soon and we'll be back to a bit more normal. I'll try not to take too much time without talking too fast, because I know people want to ask questions of Cherith, but here's the agenda. I should have opened with this. We'll just go really quickly. through some of these points. I've been director now for 8.5 months. I've been so impressed with our work in the past months. It's really been an honor to work under the leadership of our USG, Mr. Abellion, and of course the ASG, Jareth Norman, as well as our Director General, Tatiana Valovaya. It's also an honor to work with so many excellent colleagues. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate very much the collaboration and support I've gotten. Let's go to the next slide. So this is just to put numbers. People who know me know I'm, as a former executive officer, I love numbers. I think it's useful to see the evolution because we need to see some context. 2020, as we remember, all fine and dandy until mid-March. Poof, then we went basically dark for 2.5 months. In the context of meetings, our colleagues in translation were continuing to work, but through the support, with the support of colleagues in UNOG Division of Administration that has expanded the ability of us to do hybrid meetings, we've been able in 2021 to increase the total number of meetings that have been done. And of course, the in-person meeting numbers there include the meetings that were held in Glasgow with the COP. But I think this is quite impressive when you look at it and look at the jump in hybrid. 2020, we went from 900. 2021, it was 2,500. This is super impressive. 41% of our meetings with interpretation, summary records almost back on track. One thing that I think is important to realize is that before COVID, a lot of meetings were using just a meeting room. We didn't provide a lot of services aside from the room. Many of those meetings are now being handled by the conference organizers themselves, the substantive secretariats, so those aren't being captured. So I think that's part of the reason why we see the overall decrease, because we've managed to cover all the calendar meetings this year. Next slide. So here we see the words translated. Again, this is a huge achievement for our colleagues in the languages service. And you can see 2019 was some sort of wild year. I mean, 79 million words, that was a big jump. But 2020, yeah, it seems, oh, okay, we were 10 million down, but really 2020 and 2021 were completely consistent with prior years, as you see with 2018. And again, you know, I joined DCM back in 2007. The focus was very much on quality. Then there was a big shift to get people documents out on time. So that happened, and now we can see with COVID, we've been able to maintain both the volume and the timely issuance. That's very impressive. The productivity rate, also impressive, as Cherith mentioned, there was a 10% increase from 2020 to 2021. That's really great. And you can also see that's tied up with the self-revision rate, which has continued to increase. And this was part of the transition to the diamond shape that was done, it was several years ago, I can't remember exactly when, but it's great to see the impact of that. Next slide. So some of the things that I think of achievements, Cherith has really covered most of them, but again, continuing to perform even though COVID-19. So not only did we have pressures from people being sick, we also had the continuing stress of not knowing what was going to happen. The volatility, that's really hard on people because we make some arrangements, okay, this is how things work, and then poof, okay, now we're doing it differently, and now we're doing it differently again. So people have been really amazing in that they've been able to handle that so dexterously. So kudos to everyone there. Again, translation, exceeding the new productivity target. I really appreciate Michelle and Cecilia's work on helping to deal with that. And that work continues with these harmonization group and other things. So some of these issues that are being addressed are things that I recall hearing about 10 years ago. So I think it's impressive that we're really getting down into the details on that. Again, as I mentioned, increase in meetings in 2020, that's also really amazing. The big lesson learned for me is how crucial it is that we work very tightly with our colleagues in Division of Administration, Audiovisual, IT, UNIS. We have weekly meetings that I and Marie go to as well as the Chief of MMS, super important. So that's really important, the collaboration. We also need to communicate much more. So we have regular meetings with substantive secretariats and member states. And one of the things I make an effort to do is whenever there's questions, I reach out. So I've had meetings with, you know, the Swiss, the this, the that, various, we're going to be meeting with the EU DPRs on Friday, because people want to hear what's going on. They want to be able to ask questions and they want to get answers. And even if we can't give them a definitive answer and say, yes, it will be like this, they want to know what we're thinking, what alternatives we've pursued. Also, as Cherith mentioned, DGACM very much, our success relies a lot on our tools. GData 2.0 is here under the leadership of Vitaly Rusak with Reg Lambert as the project manager. This is a management decision-making tool, and it provides a lot of information to help really support the UN data strategy and help managers make data-driven decisions. Fully automated speech to text. This, if you haven't seen it, it's actually quite impressive. It's one of these things where it takes the digital recordings of meetings. It's a partnership with WIPO. It turns it into a transcript, and there's a lot of cool stuff behind it. But again, this is homegrown, and it currently is more successful on speech to text than commercially available tools. In DECO, I'm the project executive on that. Frank Moser is the manager. That's continued to grow in 2021. We've added more clients, and there's been a lot of work in terms of integration with existing systems, whether it's Umoja or the security systems. That's been a lot of effort, but I think it's going to make a big difference. Digital recording portal has been redone. That's fully in-house. And then conferencing today and tomorrow was our lessons learned effort to try to reach us. So we've reached out to member states. We've had meetings with substantive secretariats, meetings within DCM, meetings within UNOG to understand what did people see as valuable from the business continuity mode, and what are people saying, no, okay, but this has to go. Key lessons learned from this. The first thing we've heard from everybody, at least for everybody who's a conference organizer or a delegate, they want in-person meetings back. But they have a concept of what they're sort of calling a smart mix. The idea is there's some meetings that that actually benefit from being online. Meetings that are aimed at a large audience and that have very formulaic lots of statements, you know, and where people read a statement super fast. These don't have to be in person because people don't deviate from the text. However, when they're negotiating resolutions, those do. So we're going to finalize the report, we're circulating it, and then based on that, we'll be putting together some workshops and some projects to try to figure out how we can use what we've learned and bring it into the future. I'd also like to thank everybody who went to Glasgow. I had the fortune to be there for a few days, super amazing, but it really showed that it was possible to do a big in-person meeting in the midst of COVID. This was complicated. Everybody had to take a little nasal swab test every day before we went in, but really very impressive. And I was glad to hear that the UK government, when they met with Chera, said that they'd had a positive experience. So next slide, please. Well, we like to take polls. This just because we're interested in seeing what people are thinking. This is if you could, so take your phone. Take your phone, and I mean, I can manage it, and I'm not that tech adept. So take the phone, either type in slido.com and enter the number or use the QR code, and then we'll have some questions throughout the rest of the presentation. And then at the end, when we're all over, we'll have some questions asking whether or not this format was useful. So if you could go ahead and just log on, take those. And okay, we've got one answer already. Because we want to get to Q&A, we're not going to sit and watch all the numbers go up and down. But we will be releasing the final results when we share the recording of the presentation afterwards. Okay, next slide, please. One thing I wanted to mention, we are not going to be going into UNOG-wide issues, things like alternative work arrangements, how that's all working out, because UNOG will be holding a town hall meeting where those issues will be addressed. That will be in the coming weeks. You are, of course, free to put questions in the chat on that because we do have Natalia Marinenko and colleagues who can provide some answers in the chat. So some of this Cherith already mentioned. We're very fortunate. We are so grateful that the budget worked out. It was early. There was none of this, you know, December 24th or even worse into January. And we're in a good position this year. So this is going to lead, when I talk a bit about my priorities, this will feed into that. You can see we have 574 posts. The majority of those are P posts, and we have 505 staff. So this reflects the vacancy rate that we have. Next slide. So we've gotten a little bit younger. Last year, our average age was 50.6. We're down to 50.2. I admit I'm on the high side of that. We have 68 vacant posts. We were able to advertise 84 posts last year, and we closed 68 of those. One thing that I think is super important to realize is that we're again in a situation where we're going to have a lot of turnover. So you can see that this is basically 200 positions. we have 570 positions. So this is over a third of people posts will be turning over. This is over the next 10 years. So we're working to see what we can do and how we can handle that. One other point I'd like to make is currently the division is majority female. We do have gender balance. It's not perfectly balanced, but there is a majority of females. We are taking a look at that and seeing as we do recruitment. Of course, as I mentioned at our last town hall, the issue is of recruiting from a gender standpoint is broader than just the division. Next slide. So because people are quite interested in retirements, this gives you a sense and you can see where the retirements are coming. So of course, the majority of the retirements are going to be in languages service. That's 112 positions. Of course, languages service is about 300 plus positions. So it's more than half of the division. So there'll be a lot of turnover in language service. Also impressive is the turnover we're going to see in the interpretation service. So this is 46 positions. I think there's currently 87 staff there. This is basically half. So we're quite concerned with this, but this is also an issue that DGACM is looking at globally. Next slide. So some points that I'd like to mention is you've seen that there's going to be a lot of turnover in the coming 10 years. So of course, this means there's opportunities for promotions. Now, these retirements aren't completely even across all of the sections. There are some sections that are going to be very static, some sections that are going to have a lot of turnover. If you're hoping to be promoted internally, it's very important to take a look at and understand the demographics of your section, because there are some sections which are just going to have few opportunities and people may feel stuck. Other sections, simply as an accident of the demographics, may have many opportunities. So it's worth looking at this as you do your career planning and get a sense, are there going to be opportunities for you here in Geneva, or should you be looking at other duty stations? I always encourage people to look at other duty stations. In my prior career, when I was with the U.S. Foreign Service, I served in, was it 5, 6 different locations. And even if you're doing similar work, doing it in a different location brings you different ideas and nuances and approaches. So career development isn't only about promotions, of course. It's also about learning new skills, taking on new responsibilities. These may lead to promotion, they may not, depending on available opportunities. But when there is an opportunity, hiring managers look very closely to see who has some of this broad perspective. Have you been mobile? Have you volunteered? Have you done different things? This is very important. It's not a guarantee, but it's something that, one, often enriches your work, and two, gives you opportunities downstream. We spoke about the gender policy at the last town hall. Basically, it's the same thing. UN has transitioned, actually this is last year, to the new performance management system. I think that's working all right. You'll be at the end of March, we'll be finalizing that. And of course, any questions and issues about the performance management system, Natalia will be sharing at the UNOG Town Hall, and you certainly should feel free to ask your manager or your the staff assistant. I just want to reiterate, generally the expectation is, because we expect so much out of the staff, there's a very rigorous and competitive hiring process. So when people are brought in, they're already really talented. They're good, they know their work, they do excellent work. We expect a lot, and so when people meet those expectations, that means they get a meets expectations rating. If someone has done something really extraordinary, that could merit and exceeds expectations, but all of this has to be well documented. It needs to be, there needs to be explanations, exactly what was done, why was it special. I know this is a bit of a culture shift, especially in certain sections, but I think it's important to share with you that this is the expectation that I have and I have shared with the service and section chiefs. Next slide, please. Also really important for us is the Strategic Heritage Plan. So at this point, the e-building is still on track to close in October. Many people in the e-building will move directly into their final locations, not everybody. And as it turns out, COVID is impacting the SHP just like it's impacting so many places elsewhere, because of course, SHP can't be done remotely. They need to have people come in and do the construction. It's possible that some of the construction work that's happening now in the historic part of the building will be delayed. If that is the case, it may be that some of the staff will have to move to a temporary location before they move to their final location. We're working very closely. We meet with SHP every month. We raise our concerns about this because, of course, a move is really stressful and it disrupts your work. And the more times you have to move, the more problematic it is. For the two entities in e-building, that's Language Service and PSS, there'll be focal points who will be appointed 6 months in advance of October, and they'll be working with people to manage the transition. One thing I'm really pleased about, and I have to thank Catherine Pollard, who is the head of the steering committee for SHP, as well as, of course, Clements and the team. It was decided that the conference rooms being renovated will be fully equipped for hybrid conferencing. Now, while there is no mandate yet for hybrid conferencing, there is a mandate for business continuity, both in the specific situation we have in COVID and to be prepared for the next problem. Now, hopefully we won't have another pandemic, but they come and go, as we know, and there may be something else. So the expectation is that the UN is ready to handle hybrid conferencing. Even if in the end we revert to fully in person or primarily in person, the expectation is if there's a problem, we can flip a switch and switch over now to hybrid conferencing. So SHP conference rooms are in fact going to be fully equipped for that. So that's a big achievement. Next slide. So now I understand there's some problems with the Slido. So I don't know, maybe people could try joining again. I'm not sure if we've gotten okay, so I guess I'm just looking at this, so it seems to be problematic when we change slides. So we'll leave this a little bit, and if you want to just go ahead and take a moment to answer. Let me just see. We're going to be switching over to the priorities, what I can do since I'm just talking there. So in the context of DGACM's overarching priorities, we have the priorities given to us by the member states. We also have DGACM's priorities and the emphasis on innovation and technology. How we work with those here in Geneva I think we have to fulfill all of those, but I'm also very much focusing on investing in DCM's evolution. One of the things that comes with having a fully funded budget is we have a little bit of resources that we can invest for training, invest in business process re-engineering, invest in equipment if we need to. One of the things we've done with the increase in, with everybody working from home, obviously people should have the best possible laptops because you spend all your time on that. One of the things I've also asked is that we provide, as part of the standard package, we provide a camera, we provide a good mouse, because now we need to give you the best possible equipment for you to be as effective as possible from home. So that's something that we're looking at. Another key priority, and this was the same in last year, was partnerships. And this is, again, I'm very grateful to the ASG for the monthly meetings she chairs with Nairobi and Vienna, myself and herself. This is super useful because we make sure that we are all working together. We understand the situation in different locations. We share best practices. This kind of partnership, very valuable. I also am continuing my efforts and work very closely with Division of Administration here. Division of Administration is the key enabler. Yeah, go ahead, Antigone, change the slide. Is the key enabler for conferencing. If we don't have audiovisual technicians, we can't hold meetings with hybrid. So we need to make sure that we're in sync and we're working closely together on that. I think that's working very well. And then the other priority, which is basically the same as last year, is business continuity, which means making sure that the SHP does not get in the way of us doing our work, as well as we continue to be able to provide multilingual, multilateral meetings. And of course, remote conferencing. So these are the three things that I'm putting a lot of my attention in, and I can of course do that because the chiefs of service and you working in the division make sure that we're moving forward with our core priorities, translation, meetings, high quality, etc. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, what we're looking at with the investing in the evolution, we want to focus on new skills. We give people career advancement through personal and professional development. The data strategy of the SG is very important. As I mentioned, the G data is something that's helping with that. Business intelligence, very useful for helping to improve decision making and understand where we are. And of course, enhancing leadership and management acumen of the staff. Next slide. I also wanted to share with you some of the training opportunities. You know, now that we're on an annual budget, the year goes by really quickly. I read something, somebody pointed out to me, we're 1/24th of the way through the year. So I thought, okay, better get on that Christmas shopping. But it's going to go incredibly fast. So if you are interested in training, this is something, take a few minutes in the coming weeks, look at what's available and share with your manager and say, this is what we want to do. We have a partnership with CLM, which is the Center for Learning and Multilingualism, used to be SDLS, and the UNOG Library. We have a variety of courses that are available. Some of these are part of the broader, human resource framework across the UN. If you're interested in any of this, tell your manager. UNITAR training, I'm really excited. They have a 3-day course on public speaking, which I'm going to be taking. We do get training funds specifically from, centrally allocated. It's $35,000 for DCM. Now, that's 507 of us, right? So that $35,000 is not going very far. But one of the things that we do is we take some of the extra budgetary income that we have and we allocate that toward reinvest it in the division. So there are plenty of opportunities. I also encourage people on cross assignments. A couple people have recently reached out to me. I'll be following up with that. I'd like to just give just say a few words. Michelle Keating went on cross assignment with UNFCCC to support the Substantive Secretariat in preparing the COP26. And I was so impressed that she went to do that. It was super useful that she was there, and she has shared with me that it was a very valuable experience for her that helps illuminate her day-to-day work. Because she has the conference organizer perspective. So it's possible cross assignments can happen at any level, actually. So if you think you're interested in something, you see an opportunity, again, share with your manager. Next slide, please. So here we have another poll. This is what training opportunities would you like to see offered. Again, I'm not sure if the poll is working better. If not, we'll go ahead and we'll send this around separately. We'll get that sorted out. But if you see things that you haven't heard of before and you have ideas, go ahead and respond to that. And then, yep, okay, let's go to the next one. Then we have another question is, the other thing to mention, and I won't go into details because this may be mentioned at the UNOG Town Hall. There is a new mobility policy that the UN is putting in place. The details are still being sorted out. Of course, that will be addressed within the framework of DGACM overall. I do think that, interpreters and translators, those are actually very good positions to be mobile because the work is quite similar, actually. So this will be coming. We'll be providing information as it becomes available. Next slide. So this is another interesting question. Back in the day as I mentioned, when I was in the Foreign Service, I was in fact geographically mobile. I haven't been geographically mobile with the UN, although I have done different jobs and some different types of work. But it is a great opportunity because you do get different perspectives, and of course, it does reset your entitlements and things like that. But I've found, especially at the higher levels, there's often people who've worked at different duty stations because they have that broader perspective. And I think next slide, I think we're here for questions and answers. So now, unfortunately, because this is a Teams live event, it's not possible to ask questions orally, but let me just take a quick look at the chat and then we can see here. Okay, I do see okay, there's a question for you, Cherith. It says, hi, Ms. Norman Chalet, what is your role exactly? I don't understand how you share responsibilities with Mr. Abellion and Ms. Elizalde. So I don't know if you could address that.
Sure, I'm happy to. To make it as simple as possible, it would be considered a deputy position. So if you have the head of the department, and Moses was actually double-hatted for a couple of years as the Undersecretary General and the Assistant Secretary General. But how we've divvied up in practical terms, the work, because it's quite expansive. We both have similar, obviously the overview of the department. I help with the managing of the budget and human resources, working with the executive office. But I specifically have the documentation division, the central planning and service CPCD division, and the meetings and publishing division here in New York, reporting directly to me as the first reporting officer, and then I oversee the work of the duty stations as having a dotted line to Kira, Shavona, and Ahid, the heads of conference management in the duty stations. So the difference between Cecilia and I is that she's the director of one division, and I'm looking at the bird. I have an across the board view and management role in that, and I engage the member states along with the Undersecretary General and the senior management elsewhere in the Secretariat. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better understanding and an overview.
Okay, that looks good. I'm just looking to see. I see there was, okay, there's another, oh, okay. There's a very long question here for you, Cherith, from B. Kaiser saying, I work in the DMS planning unit, and a year ago, our colleague went on early retirement, putting her workload on my colleague and myself. My colleague and myself started at the beginning of the planning unit in 2009 and at the beginning of planning of documentation. Yeah, I remember when that happened. That was a while ago. We've been very active in supporting the development of various reports through Pentaho. That was the tool that we used, and have worked hard on enabling a smooth transition from DRITS to GDoc. So DRITS, Cherith, was the document management system that was the precursor to GDoc. Okay, so let's see, putting work methods into place, helping clients through trainings. Since then, we are equally active in helping shape GDoc 2.0, which is not up and running. GData is very useful. Okay, so the question here seems, we heard that Pentaho will stop, and that this is the G. Okay, I think this is about the GData, the GData 1. So there's some question about why did we stop GData 1, which will stop on the end of January, as opposed to, and then they're saying they find that useful. I think maybe, Cherith, you want me to maybe just give some initial thoughts and then you could fill in if need be. So basically the question is, why can't we keep GData 1.0 up and running for a couple months so the transition will go as smoothly as possible? And I think, if I recall, this is also something that Vitaly knows, since he's the person handling GData. I think the thing is, at some point you just have to draw a line as to when you're going to stop the legacy system and switch over. I know that there's been a lot of work on getting people to test the GData 2.0 to make sure that was available. But there is a cost to maintaining the old system as well as the new system. So I think the feeling was that we needed to just draw a line under it and say, okay, let's switch to the new system. I know this maybe is a little down in the weeds, but is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you said it. I mean, I think there is, and we were very aware. I mean, the deadline was the end of the year, and we were hoping to keep to that. And it is that, drawing the line in the sand, so to speak. But we did become aware that there were these remaining issues that needed to be shored up. So there was that exception given to extend it through the end of January. But Vitaly may want to add more. But I just want to say, though, I know it's been an incredible amount of work and effort working with the other colleagues in the different duty stations, especially in New York, and trying to get that data and solid and making sure that the transition goes well. So I very much appreciate that. I know it's not been an easy task, but it's also very helpful for me to see some of the history behind some of these in the details. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you. Great. There's another question for you. The DHMOSH report was presented in July 2021, and one of the recommendations was a health screening questionnaire for the reporting of RSI-related health symptoms available to all interpreters in all duty stations. 6 months have passed and we haven't received any information on that. Any developments? Thank you. This is from Claudia Frazan.
Thank you very much for and I was expecting this question. It is something I absolutely understand that this was put forward as one of the options, and we're very keen to get this off the ground. I'm actually engaging even as of the end of the year, but even now with our DMOSH colleagues. There were some delays in getting that started, and I'm still sorting those out, to be very candid as to why, but we are committed to getting a global survey out as soon as possible. So stay tuned.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Could you explain what was meant by integrated sharing of conference servicing referred to earlier? Specifically, would this include interpreters servicing meetings remotely at other duty stations? This is from Christina Belas, who is the chief of the English booth.
I think if I understand the question right, what I was focused on was the integrated global management, but also workload sharing. I know that the idea or the effort to try to have interpreters servicing meetings remotely at other duty stations has been tried, and I know that hasn't always worked out. That's not specifically what we're looking at. It's looking at how we can within the translation services, if there's documents that need priority, but the capacity is low in one area, that we share that. So it is something that has been explored, but I think we're looking at if that were to come as a need, we would continue to do that, but right now we're not there.
Okay, one more question. There's another question that I think is for you is, if workload sharing is implemented, and we already have some implementation already, does it mean that practices in the duty station sharing the task have to do the work in the way that the asking duty station is doing it, or could they be autonomous in their efficient practices? So I guess there's a question. This is an interesting question, actually. So we do have workload sharing. So I guess the question is does the can the work be done the way the duty station does it, that's receiving it, or does it have to be done in a way that the requesting duty station is posing it?
That's a very good question, and I feel like if I try to answer this, I'm going to get in trouble in terms of, I don't know, what would Geneva's views on this be? I presume it would be desired in the way that the requesting duty station is asking for the work to be done, because they know best what the client or the whoever's asking for the services, they know best what they expect. But I actually would welcome views, but that would be my initial response, is that it would be, but I'm also very cognizant that there are ways to do things differently. So I wouldn't want to put everyone in a straitjacket, so to speak.
Well, I think what would be the interesting question to me is why would the outcome be that different? Because I would assume the how it's done, it should be that we should look at the output and make sure that the output is usable by the requester, as opposed to that the work in the middle be done the same way as it was done by the requester, because there may be some differences. But I think that's probably one of those things that depends specifically on what it is. But of course, the outcome would need to be usable by the requester. Otherwise, that wouldn't make sense at all, actually. Okay, I see. Let's see. There's another comment. There's a comment from an anonymous person saying, regarding the question on geographic mobility, I replied no, but I would be interested if I knew I wouldn't get stuck anywhere. The staff interchange was wonderful in that way, and it was a big shame that the initiative has been terminated. I think we'll be learning more about the mobility, the new Secretariat-wide mobility system, but maybe, Charles, you could share just a little bit about why we've paused the staff interchange.
And just to be clear, I think that there were the staff interchanges. This is also different from the IVAs. Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the staff interchanges, I think that this is something that was tried, and from what I understand and what I've seen even in the past in engaging DGACM on this, is that it wasn't, I can see the value and where staff would see this as an opportunity, but it wasn't fully meeting the needs. But it's something that I will come back to in a more fulsome way to understand. But this is something the member states had a very strong view on as well, and were concerned about what was the outcome there.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind, could you share a few thoughts on the gender balance question? We have a specific question concerning the gender balance. Does which I mean, I assume mean the current, the fact that 55% of the staff in DCM are women now, does that mean men will be privileged over women when assigning the posts in order to create a balance? This is an excellent question, and it's really complicated. I have some thoughts, but of course I'll defer to yours.
I very much appreciate these are good, tough questions and right to the heart of many matters. So I appreciate it. I wouldn't say that anyone's privileged over the other. I think we are looking at the best qualified candidate, obviously with due regard to what our demographics are in the department. And so that's going to continue to drive. And if there is a need to ensure that there is a balance, whether it's having more men than women or vice versa, but ultimately looking at the qualifications and who's best qualified, because what we would is definitely what is driving our thought on this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course, that's it. The idea is you've done the best qualified people. If there are two equally qualified people and one is a man and a woman, that's when, of course, when this comes into play. And anybody who is passed through the central review body and is on that list, the recommended list, is considered to be qualified for the post. We do look at this when we're looking at hiring, and I was quite pleased that our colleagues in Human Resources, when they were at a recent event down in Milan, they shared a presentation with HR colleagues from around the Secretariat showing what could happen if you just blindly apply this, okay, woman, woman, woman thing, and then how. So you can have sections that flip from maybe majority man to majority woman, and actually keeping a balance is a bit more complicated. So we are aware of the nuances, and we are trying to take a look at that. There's also an element of people applying. So you do need to have people apply, and I want to just sort of circle back to the succession planning issue. So we have all of these retirements coming up. A few things people need to be aware of. First of all, there is a new PHP. So the one that you filled out 5 years ago or 10 years ago will no longer be valid. So if you expect to be applying for a position in the next year or 2 or 3, you should redo your PHP. There are specific courses available on this, and we have asked CLM to get us some, to provide some training and support on that. The new PHP is shorter, and as we all know from Blaise Pascal, writing shorter is harder than writing longer. So please take your time with that. I also really encourage you, even if you're not necessarily that keen on going to another duty station, applying for a post is valuable experience. Applying for a post, if you pass through the process, you can get on the roster. That can facilitate things downstream. Now, being rostered is not a guarantee that you will get selected later, but it is very useful to give people experience. I remember being on a panel at some point, and some of the colleagues who were outstanding colleagues, great reputations, worked really hard, hadn't done an interview in 15 years, and it really showed. So just from that standpoint, in terms of mobility or even just promotions, please do think of that. Now I see another question from Leslie Filon saying, "Dear ASG, I took part in the staff interchange. It was a fantastic experience, even though the pandemic hit in the middle, and I would be happy to discuss my experience with you to feed into a similar program in the future." So I think that's worth noting.
Yeah. Kara, I'll just come in really quick. I appreciate that very much, and I think it'll be very useful to hear that, especially in the context of the new mobility report being and options and how it impacts DGACM and how we will feed into that as well.
Then there's another question on this, and this may be a question for Natalia. Can a short-term employment with another UN agency program in Geneva be considered as part of the mobility exercise? Maybe Natalia, if you could just share a few words about what you know about this new mobility system, if anything that specific has been sorted out. Natalia, over to you.
Thank you, Kira. On mobility, very recently, what we have seen, there was a Secretary General's report submitted on mobility, because mobility, as you remember, was suspended in 2016. There was one round of mobility and it was suspended. 2 rounds of mobility, I would say, and suspended. The report was submitted and withdrawn because the General Assembly has not even considered the previous report. What I know about previous report, there was a working group between staff representatives and management that considered all options about mobility, made the scheme all-inclusive, creative, various types of mobility, not just like straight jacket mobility for 1 year. There is a question, can a short-term employment with another UN agency program in Geneva be considered as part of the mobility exercise? Definitely yes. In the current framework, it's any 3 months can be counted in with the UN common system as well. And this 3 months can be added up to 1 year. Once it's 1 year, it will make for one lateral move. For majority positions, it's not language positions, but for majority managerial positions, in order to be promoted to be P5, you need 2 lateral moves. This is also in the reports that geographic mobility might be the requirement for the promotion at a higher levels, at least 1 geographic mobility. And there is a talk that the mobility will be voluntary for serving staff and will become mandatory for all newcomers. So if you will opt in for mobility, you will be in. But if you will not opt in for mobility, you will not be in, and you will not be forced to be mobile, especially geographically. But as Kira said, mobility, and especially across the duty stations in the field, and between the duty stations, enhances our promotion opportunity, gives us satisfaction, broadens our horizons. So that's about mobility. We do some preparatory work on mobility. We have been asked to do the evaluation of what posts are rotational and what are not rotational. And as far as UNOG is concerned, almost all posts, including in DCM, are rotational. There are very few, like 4 or 5 positions, which do considered highly specialized and non-rotational.
Great, thank you so much, Natalia.
Now, Kira, really quickly, I was just going to come in. I think we will have more clarity, I think, in the coming months. Hopefully, as Natalia mentioned, the GA has not endorsed. This has been a very contentious discussion over the last few years. I was very at the front lines of those discussions. But there is an updated report that's due. It will be before the 5th committee in March for their first resume session, and so let's see if they are able to. But I know that the management is very much looking forward to hopefully some movement on this and enabling us, because as you both said, that the ultimate goal is to allow staff members to benefit from the diversity and richness of mandates and the duty stations and the different experiences, as well as developing the skills and incentivizing career enhancement. So let's hope that there can be some common ground found.
Fingers crossed. Another question for you, Cherith, which is one of great interest, certainly here in Geneva. We get this question all the time from certain member states. What are the prospects of getting a mandate for hybrid conferencing in the near future? I know this is politically sensitive.
Oh, sorry about that. My computer is acting funny. Yes, it's a very good question. It's something that we're all curious about and awaiting, but also I think as you've highlighted, Kira, not something that we're still trying to capture as we go along without seeing where the member states may go on this, trying to capture the lessons learned, because I think regardless, but in terms of a mandate, there were discussions that started in the Committee on Conferences in September. There is a variety of opinions that started from the outset of the pandemic and how we had to even change the way things were happening here in New York and Geneva in terms of meetings, what constituted, and even a quorum, what the rules of procedures are set for in-person meetings. And so what's a formal meeting, what's an informal when you're virtual? And so I think member states have been adjusting as they go, but I think there's a recognition by a vast majority that there is that the pandemic, as awful and as no one wants to go through a pandemic to get to this conclusion, is that it's shown that we can do work differently. We can do things even more efficiently and effectively. We can increase accessibility and for all. Around the world, it's amazing to see how plugged in the global citizenry is over the last couple of years, just because we've been able to increase that visibility because we're virtual, or things are done either through pre-recorded statements or etc. But I think there are some fundamental issues that still have to be worked, and it's a huge transition from the way that UN meetings and conferences have happened. So the discussions continued in the Fifth Committee over the fall. There was language that was put into the budget resolution by certain delegations that were trying to move it forward a bit. They were asking for the Secretariat to provide that outlook. Obviously, it's a bit difficult because it was the cart before the horse. It's like, we can provide lessons learned and we can provide what we've seen, but until we know exactly what the member states need and want, it's difficult for us to provide even more concrete recommendations. And so I expect that this conversation will continue. I think it will. I think we will continue to be asked what our views are and those lessons learned. So I think the work that you're doing on conferencing today and tomorrow is useful as member states sort out where they want to go and how they want to position the UN and its operations writ large.
Excellent. And one of the things we hear about here, we discuss here is this is also where Clements and I, Division of Administration and DCM, are really in lockstep. We are both very clear in all our member state conversations. The DG is also very clear on bringing this forward. It's up to the member states. One nuance we may see, we may find certain bodies deciding to take matters into their own hands and saying, we will mandate our work be done via hybrid conferencing. None of that has happened yet. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves. Another question which I think is of interest. Someone asked, I think this is a good, thoughtful intervention. Does the high rate of retirements and coming turnover mean that staff on fixed term appointments can enjoy a relative stability, i.e. that they can be more or less safe in terms of employment continuity? Charis, if you have any thoughts on that.
I was trying to find the question.
That's up at 327.
Read it. Okay. Jeez. I would just say that we. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little bit more. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I would say generally that absolutely we will, we are, as you've seen through the slides, but also the statistics that Kira presented, we are looking at a high rate of retirement over the next 10 years, and we will be looking at our global workforce and who's where and when. And I think that absolutely, if there is the skills and functions are there, and the requirements, those will be looked at first. To say to commit to relative stability, I think what are being safe in terms, I think we are committed to our staff and providing opportunities without saying much more, but we are very, this is something that we're going to be looking at very carefully, is the workforce planning and how we are filling those positions, and very much looking at our staff and taking care of them as well.
And if I could, I think that, there's definitely going to be a lot of turnover. So, and there are many internal opportunities for staff. So I think that's very positive. Of course, it's all a function of what happens in the outside world. At the end of every budget session, everybody sighs a huge sigh of relief if there's nothing unpleasant. Our colleagues in DOA recall, I don't know, was it 2016, 17, where they got an extremely unexpected, I think it was a 5% cut, but so, the head of Division of Administration was scrambling because he had to cut positions with basically zero notice. So assuming things move the way they're moving without any unexpected changes externally, I do think that there will be some stability, but again, it completely depends on the outside world, and it also depends on the functions that we need. Now, there was a new question down. So here, there's another question, and this is down at 339, it's near the bottom. Are there any active measures provided to rehabilitate staff and reintegrate them into another profession at the UN if they are deemed incapable to proceed as usual because of RSI-related health issues and side effects? So I would assume that would be interpreters, what we would do to rehabilitate them or reintegrate them elsewhere. I don't know, have there been any discussions on that?
So this is something that we have had to look at, based on the feedback. And I was very grateful in able to hear directly from the interpreters over the 2 town halls that I held last year. And I know that our directors and chiefs are very committed to finding solutions. If there isn't an ability to continue in interpreting or whatever it may be, I think more broadly, and so we've looked at different options that could be where we could use staff, but I think more broadly that those conversations have not fully taken place. There is a support for us to find those solutions, but as a longer term goal or plan, I would say it's right now we're looking at it case by case and trying to take care of the staff as best we can.
Okay, now that makes sense. I certainly, I think, seems quite early in this. Christine Ballas, this is the last question, has another question, the latest question, not the last one. We haven't gone through everything. Are member states aware of the attrition costs entailed by remote and hybrid interpretation? A number of interpreters have sustained long-term or permanent hearing damage due to substandard sound quality inherent in such meetings. So this sort of builds on what you were saying with the nuance that are member states aware of the issues around that?
I would say generally, yes. We have been trying to increase their awareness and their understanding. But I will be candid. I think that and we've heard this through the various interactions when we've had conversations with the member states and on business continuity measures, but also in the Committee on Conferences and the Fifth Committee. I think that they themselves feel the, how do I say this, feel the strain or the demands, and they are continuing to press for more details, more understanding, but also the expectations are still very high, and I don't want to. I wouldn't want there to be any misunderstandings. I think the expectations and what the provision of services that they expect, it's, you know, our decision to reduce the interpretation time for remote interpretation to 2 hours from 3 hours didn't sit well, and still doesn't sit well, because they know that they're paying for the 3-hour time slot and they're only getting 2 hours. But it's something that we feel very strongly about, ensuring that within our power to try to take some of, because of the concerns that we have received and seen, that we take these mitigation measures at the moment. I think that the awareness, as I said, was growing, and I think, you know, in my observation, the chairs of the various committees, at least here in New York, you know, are taking a more proactive stance in ensuring that delegations are speaking slower. They have the rights. If the sound isn't there, they're calling it, and basically indicating to the delegations that then interpretation can't be provided. But I think this is also our responsibility, is to continue to provide that information and continue to educate the member states. So thanks for the question.
Okay, no, thank you. Now we have a question from Elan Valmalet. He is one of our 2 blind translators. This is a question that's way up in the string. It's up at 312. He says, are there any plans to make Umoja accessible? For the time being, it is not accessible using screen reader software, which may raise confidentiality issues. And of course, this is also an issue too, because it's more complicated for our colleagues, these 2 colleagues, to actually use Umoja, so it takes extra time, which is an issue, of course, for translators.
I can answer.
Natalia, go ahead.
Yes, I am not aware of the plans to make Umoja accessible. For the time being, OHR is working on making Inspira and achieved some progress in making Inspira accessible to the candidates, to outreach, to attract new candidates, and to encourage employment of people with disabilities. Umoja not, but definitely if accessibility cannot be provided, people who are concerned can ask for reasonable accommodation and for additional help to deal with Umoja issues. That would be my answer on this issue.
Thank you. I think that's good. I'm just looking, there was a question upstream from sort of right near the beginning. So, and I apologize for people who ask questions early, because we have to scroll back. So there's a question from Danny Kuttner, who is one of our English translators. He said, a few years ago, DCM initiated a bottom-up feedback exercise, which was held just a few times and not repeated recently. Are there plans to repeat this exercise, and if so, when? Some of the exercises advocated elsewhere within the Secretariat confuse feedback with evaluation assessment, which can be counterproductive. Will future exercises of both types respect this distinction? And I think so. What's being alluded to here is the new, I think it's called performance management indicator. Can't remember. There's one of the new HR
People management index. People
management. Okay, it's a PMI, private mortgage insurance. So I'm always, sometimes there's a few too many acronyms. Maybe Natalia, if you wouldn't mind, you could share, because I think HRMS conducted this feedback exercise. If you could maybe share some thoughts. I'm open to revisiting this if it's useful.
If I can give my sentiment about it, when this was done with the help in partnership with HR, staff counselors, office, and outside company, this was for developmental purposes. And I would say that we were pioneers in this. We were experimenting with this. It was rolled first to D1s, and then it was later on rolled to P5s. I believe in DCM, it required some to develop a culture of feedback, to encourage the conversation. And I think what is launched now is, yes, it is called assessment. It is establishing the People's Management Index, but it's not the assessment which is important. The dialogue is important, creating common language and creating the culture of feedback. Yes, it is less free, it is maybe structured, but it gives you the possibility to give feedback on leadership style and effectiveness of your manager as manager. And the first aim of this exercise is to explore the opportunities for development and growth for those managers. Assessment will come later on. It is still a pilot. It is rolled to D1s, D2s. We are now holding the conversations whether we let this project mature and or roll it out next spring to lower levels, P5s, P4s, to all the managers. And there are some polar views, even with OHR, whether to roll it out or not. I would say that it still have to mature. And to also say that HRMS team has facilitating sessions for those managers who are required to hold these dialogues with their staff, to build the common language, to build the common understanding, to be prepared for the tool, and to be ready for this, feedback in March 2022, which is soon. And I believe we did some interventions with some of your teams, Kira, on People's Management Index and what does it mean. So my underlining is, bottom line is that these are not two self-excluding projects, the 360 feedback that we did earlier and the new one, which is the centrally rolled out 360 feedback.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. I don't know, Chair, I don't know if there's been discussion in New York about the new PMI, the People Management Index, and how that's being rolled out. I know this is a secretary-wide initiative.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of details on that, but I do know that DMSPC and OHR are they will be they're holding a conference soon, I think in May, to just to take a stock take about all the efforts they're doing. So I expect more will come from that.
Okay, no, thank you. Yeah, we're aware that it's coming, but we're also waiting to see how it plays out. There's a question, which I guess is mostly for me. Why this shift in culture for performance ratings? This is tied up with the approach that people, the vast majority of people get meets expectations. I don't know, Charith, if you want to share anything, because I know this is really my initiative on my side. If there's any thoughts on that, and then I could elaborate from where what my thinking is.
I mean, I'm happy for you to explain further, but I would just say, as a general matter, I think what we are looking at performance and seeing and looking very critically at the performance, and when the duties are there, the work plan is there, and staff are meeting those, that is still, that's a good rating. We need to have that differentiation, and I think that's what we're trying to maintain is that differentiation of recognizing in those instances going above and beyond.
Yeah, if I could, I think, and again, this is, you can, we're always shaped by our prior experiences, and my prior experience working in the State Department, they have a different performance management system, and it's somewhat of a different culture, but the system is taken very seriously, and there's a lot of material that's written when you do the end of year performance evaluation, but it's very much the emphasis is on what you did, but the majority, the State Department has a thumbs up, thumbs down. You met your work plan or you didn't. So my background is very much, okay, let's look at the specifics of what people did, etc. So as I put in the performance, in the presentation, if somebody has really exceeded the clearly spelled out expectations, and it's clear what they did and why they had done it, and that's fully documented, then yes, of course, that person can get and exceeds expectations. But the expectations that we set for people are quite high, because we have great people. We expect a lot from people. They do good work, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be doing good work. And this isn't really a new culture shift. I think this is at one point, when Catherine Pollard was back the head of human resources, I don't know, maybe it was 2010, but at some point this was announced, this was the effort, and our 2 directors ago, Mr. Grachev, he said, this is how we're going to be doing it, and that's what he implemented, and I was happy to enjoy meets expectations after that. So this isn't new. One of the reasons why it's important is that it lets people understand that what they're doing is what's expected. And if everybody in a section exceeds expectations, everyone's like, I'm exceeding expectations, I should be promoted next, I should be promoted right away. So that can sometimes be frustrating for people. I'd also like to add that UNOF has been doing this for quite some time. UNOF actually has a performance board, basically. So if a manager wishes to give somebody an exceeds expectation, that is actually reviewed, and they make sure that that's fully justified in the text, and the people who review that are like, yes, this makes sense. So this isn't something that we're doing independently. We're really being much more consistent with, for instance, how UNOF has been doing it. And one of the reasons why we mention UNOF, of course, is that our own chief of interpretation came from Vienna and certainly was promoted out of there. So people still move from Vienna. It's not that if you don't get, people have the idea, oh, if I don't get exceeds expectations, I'll never get promoted. That's definitely not the case. Let me just scroll down to the bottom and see if there's any new questions, because we're very close to the end. Okay, so somebody has been saying here that staff are not being, I beg to differ with Kira about staff being promoted on higher qualifications. Some staff are promoted while not meeting the minimum GJP criteria. And then there's a question, why is HR allowing this to happen? Well, okay, so I'm not exactly sure of the details behind that. If somebody is genuinely concerned that something is going on that's inappropriate, there are a whole bunch of accountability mechanisms that you can pursue with that. OIOS, ethics office, etc. So if you see something that you think is completely improper, I strongly encourage you to submit that. One thing I point out is that promotions and selection processes are confidential, so there may be things that you are unaware of. Often a promotion exercise includes test taking. Those test scores are not shared with everybody, and they shouldn't be. You know, everybody performs, there's interviews, those are written up. You don't know what happened in the interviews, etc. But again, if this is something where you're absolutely convinced this is the case, the organization has mechanisms to report that, and I would encourage you to do that, because if there's a sense, and if this sense is widespread, then that's a huge problem. So I'm trying to see, maybe we can, because we're just about done. Chris, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to share with everybody?
I would just say thanks very much for this robust exchange. I have greatly benefited just by hearing what some of the issues that are front and center on your mind, and where we need to continue to engage and share that information with member states who are our ultimate client and ones that we're here to serve. So I just want to say thank you very much. I've taken note of all the comments and questions, and there are ones that we will be following up on, including the global survey, as I said, for interpretation and what that impact has been for the remote simultaneous interpretation. But Kira, thank you. Thanks to you and your chiefs for the leadership that you've shown through these months, and for all the staff, again, for your dedication and commitment. We are very grateful and really commend you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for taking the time and joining us. I know that you have an incredibly busy schedule, so really thank you very much. Thank you as well to Natalia and her team for joining us. It's very helpful for you to answer questions. We're very grateful of that, and I know it's people appreciate having the opportunity. There are a few questions that are unanswered. There's a quite intriguing one about, do you have dollar cost numbers breakdown between productive, unproductive staff? We'll go ahead and try to provide some information in response to questions that we haven't answered. Everyone, do bear with us. It can take us a little while to provide. It's not so much getting the recording and the transcript. It's more that we go through the answers to the questions and make sure that they've been properly addressed, and we vet them before we circulate the final thing. Again, everybody, bonne année, Happy New Year. I look forward to working with you all in the coming months, years, etc. And thank you, everyone, very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was reminded, survey, take the survey. We do have a survey of whether or not this was useful, so please take that to see if this is helpful. This helps us shape the future survey. So, thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.